Hey everybody, this is Fran Fraschella, draft expert and basketball junkie. To everybody who's watching, let's get our friends at General Manager Games the subscribers they deserve. Just press that red subscriber button and immerse yourself in sports AI through GM Games content. And on Twitter, it's GM_games. Let's get after it. Let's go.
What is up, folks? Cards here for GM Games, bringing you our top 10 tips, recommendations, best practices. Call it whatever you want. These are 10 things you've got to know in Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2021. If you guys saw the video that we did last year for our top 10 tips, anybody that saw that's going to see, you're going to notice a lot of the same ideas. The new 2021 game has brought a lot of new content, new interesting ways to go about things and do things, but the core of the game and the core ideas are going to be similar. So we've got a lot of the same ideas coming to you, but a whole nother year of experience and perspective to put that through. So without any further ado, let's get to our top 10 tips. Number 10. Gaining reputation and prestige. People ask all the time how to grow their program, how to make their program more prestigious, how to make their coach have a better reputation so they get a better job offer. And as obvious as the answer seems, people still ask the question. So you got to win games, folks. You've got to win games. Winning games over prestigious schools is going to help you grow faster. Winning games in the conference tournaments is going to make your prestige gain faster, your reputation gain faster. And ultimately, the best way to improve as a coach, to improve your program, is you've got to win games in the NCAA tournament. It's the absolute quickest way to take a bad team to a high prestige level, take an unknown coach to a very well-known coach with the high reputation. You can see your coach's reputation down here. And this is what is going to affect you getting better jobs. If you come in, you can see all of the information on your coach in here. But the reputation is what you want to be looking at. Right up here, mine is below average in my first season at 39. As you win more games, as you win in the NCAA tournament, that's going to go up. That's going to allow you, if you're trying to do a journeyman save, to get a better job at a better program. The prestige or the reputation gains for the coaches, you'll probably notice, are going to end up being a little bit faster than the prestige for the schools improves. These schools have what I like to call kind of a natural prestige level. And so you've got to have sustained success over a longer term to really change, a program that's perpetually down in the 40s of prestige and get them up to 90. That's going to be quicker to take a team from 80 to 90 than 40 to 90. And, that sounds like it should be obvious, but it's a significant difference. It's not just the rate of increase. A team that's been down there in the 40s, they're going to want to stick closer to that for longer. You're going to have more success over a more sustained period to improve that. So don't get down, just get to March and win games. So that's the way to do it. No big surprise there. I will say I've noticed, I think that, in this may be with the natural prestige or it may be with the opponents, but I think that teams in the power conferences tend to gain prestige quicker. And my theory is that that's because they're playing better opponents in the regular season, better opponents in the conference tournaments, and they've got a lot more opportunities for big quality wins over other prestigious programs than you would see at a smaller school. But at the end of the day, nothing at all replaces winning in March. So win games in March, make Final Fours, hang banners, and you will see your coach's reputation and your school's prestige skyrocket. Number 9. Recruiting has to be built around the in-home visits. So you have got to prepare for those in-home visits. In-home visits are massive. In the 2021 game, you'll see the recruiting button has been moved right up here. So you can click here and see what players you're recruiting. So if we click on a player, for example, you'll see down here, visit the recruit. This is going to open up to you on September 11th. And you can see there's a schedule of these key dates right here. So this will tell you the different periods. September 11th through October 8th is the contact period. It's going to give you 4 weeks. 4 weeks worth of opportunities to do in-home visits, and you can have a massive effect on a recruit's interest in your school during this period. There are definitely recruits that really have never seem interested in my program until I get in their living room. That can make all the difference. So to prepare for that, there's a handful of things that you need to be doing. You've got to identify your targets. Make sure that you know what players you intend to go after. However you go about evaluating them, you're going to want to see how are your scouts evaluating them. What's the overall grade that they're giving you there? What are the recruits' grades? Look at their GPA and compare that to your school's required SAT score. Because if your school, if you're coaching Duke and you require an 1100 SAT score and you've got a recruit with a 2.2 GPA, it doesn't matter if they have interest in you or if they score 30 points a game. They'll never step foot on your campus, so that's a bad target. So you need to quickly identify your targets, make sure they're going to be eligible. This year, they've increased the difficulty in recruiting, so it's more important than ever to check the interest of a recruit. Like you can see here on interest level, I've got this center who's pretty interested. When you look down here, Louisville, he's actually hot on Louisville, and he's only warm on a number of these other programs. You will notice that this top 10 list will not change until you get to August. Once you get to August, that's going to change every week. If you get to August and you're not on that list, you're not toward the top of that list, you don't have, for example, in here, if this list reorganizes right now and Louisville goes straight to the top, followed by Kentucky, Florida, North Carolina, and all the rest of these schools remain at cool and drop off, there's 4 schools that have a realistic shot. North Carolina, you could still be going after this guy, no problem at all, especially if you've got a pretty high recruiting level on your head coach. But if you're the Zags, if you're Tennessee, and this was still set the same way on September 4th, this probably isn't a target for you. I mean, I'm not saying you can't pull it off, but the likelihood to flip someone who is not interested in your school in this year's version compared to prior years is significantly harder to do that. So make sure as you're identifying targets, make sure they're actually interested in you. And right along with that, know what your limits are. If you're a 30 prestige school, you got no business recruiting the top 10. I mean, maybe if you've got illegal recruiting or something on, maybe once in a million years you can do that. But, for the most part, you need to be recruiting players that are an appropriate level for your school. Find those diamonds in the rough and bring them in, and that's how you're going to improve your school and rise up and then eventually compete for these 5-star guys. But, Directional State University is probably not competing for 5-star players. So if you're doing that, you're really hurting yourself. Make sure you're targeting players that are appropriate for your school. And then you've got to call your targets and unlock this recruit information. So as Louisville, if I intend to pursue this recruit, I need to call and unlock these different pitches so that when I'm ready to make my in-home visit, I'm pitching that recruit the appropriate pitch, something that he wants to hear about. You also need to keep an eye on the parental information. Let's see if we've got a player in here with a little bit more information that I can show you some of this. You can't see the actual parent info here, but you can see parental control. These parents are going to have a big effect on this recruit. So you need to know if the recruit's listening to what the parents are talking about, you might want to jump over and check out what the parents are interested in, right? So make sure you know what's going on there as well. But call your targets, unlock that information, identify smart targets, make smart pitches that these guys want to hear, whether it's what they want to hear, what their parents want to hear, or even if it's their second or third most interested attribute, but your school's got a huge advantage over it compared to anyone else that's up there at the top. Make sure that you're making smart pitches. And one more free hint while we're on it. The gold reports in this year's version, guys, you need, if you can at all afford those gold reports, make sure you're getting them so you get all of this information. You know what their interest level is in other schools, and you've got some kind of idea of who your competitors are. Because if you get the basic report, you're not going to have this. All you will know is your school. So, moving along, tip number 8. You need to know that playing time is going to help your players' development, and it's also going to help your own coach's scouting rating of your players. When you come over here on the dashboard, first of all, these star ratings are based on the information that your coach has. So it gets better the more information your coach has. If you're still in the recruiting period and you're watching film, that's very limited information. If you go and visit them and watch a game in person, do the live visit, or if you go watch them in a camp, you're going to get more information. You're going to have a better scouting report. And then once they get to your campus, you're going to get a much better look. But then as they continue to practice, continue to play, all that good stuff, you're going to get more and more precise scouting information on some of your players. People like to ask, I had a 4-star guy and the season progressed, and next year it says he's only 3 stars. Why'd he get worse? He probably didn't get worse. It's probably just that your coach has a more accurate assessment of what his true ability is, and you're getting a clearer look there. So that's how it works with the scouting. Now, as far as actual development and that sort of thing, actually getting playing time is going to help the players improve quicker. In my experience, it's helped them learn the offenses better. Like, take my point guard here, for example. You can see he's pretty good at the flex Princeton triangle. Somebody who may also be a senior but had a different level of playing time, like if they didn't get as much playing time, in my experience, sometimes they're lower on some of these proficiencies. And there can be a little bit of variance in that. But I've always found that the players that get more playing time are going to get better at a quicker rate. The other thing is, if you've got guys that are part of the long-term plan for your team, each of these players in their player profile, they've got a rating for playing time. You can see that a little bit as you recruit them, but you can also see it right here in the player profile. So you can see here I've got a couple of guys that are not too concerned as we scroll through here. Doesn't care. Of course, as I look for an example, I don't have anybody on this entire team that's worried about playing time. Some people down here are going to want solid minutes. They're going to want starters minutes, and you need to know that, because if you want that player to be a part of your program's future, you better give them the minutes that they're asking for. If not, you're going to see their little attitude right here. How my guys, we got a lot of green smiley faces. If they don't get their playing time that they're wanting, you're going to see those turn yellow, like this guy, and eventually turn red. And then your player could eventually transfer out if they're not getting the playing time. So make sure you're aware of that. If you got a guy that wants to play and you're not playing him, just know the risk that you run. If you want him to stick around, get him on the court, develop him, scout him, all that good stuff. So, with that being said, tip number 7, make sure that you are running plays that your players know how to run. I have seen some programs, and believe me, I have wrecked some programs, because I'll come in and say, okay, you know how to run the flex, the Princeton, and the triangle. That's not what I run. I run the high post, and just completely change this around and try to run the high post. Terrible idea. Please, if you listen to anything, never do that. It's so bad. Knowing how to run these different plays at a high level of proficiency is going to give your players a little bit of a boost in their performance. They're going to, they're going to run the plays better. They're going to know where they need to be. It's going to lead to less turnovers, better shots, more scoring. And, of course, the inverse of that, if they're running things they don't know how to run, then they're going to be turning the ball over. You're not going to be turning that into points. So you're going to cause yourself all sorts of problems. You can adjust for this a little bit if you look over here on the strategy page. You do get an offensive set usage. This is how often your players are running the sets that you're asking them to run, as opposed to just creating, being creative and going down there and getting the ball in the basket. If you run a team that's real one and done heavy, you've got players that you're trying to play a lot of sophomores and freshmen and players that don't have high experience level with these different offenses. Drop this offensive set usage down. Let those guys, those top players, they're not going to come in knowing how to run the offense, but they know how to score. So drop the offensive set usage down. 50% is usually about as low as I like to go, but feel free to experiment around with that and see where you feel it's most appropriate. But I like to drop this down for younger teams. I like to increase it for more experienced teams. If I get every one of my starters are seniors and juniors, and they all know the offense, and everybody that's going to be on the court knows the offense, I've cranked that up to 80, 85, I don't know, maybe even 90. So keep in mind, that's another tool in your toolbox. But run plays that your players know. That also has a lot of implications when you talk about the Princeton offense. So here in this drop down, you can see the different offensive set descriptions. And a lot of these, like motion and triangle, are going to be traditional sets with big men near the basket, that sort of thing. Each of these plays will tell you a little bit about it. In the Princeton, it's going to tell you a good passing center is crucial to the success of the offense, as well as trained players making good cuts. I only like to run the Princeton at smaller schools where I know I'm going to be playing juniors and seniors. At Louisville, this is the first year of this save, which is why these players know how to run the Princeton, and I'm running it a little bit. If you look at my plan long term, it will be to get away from the Princeton. Princeton's not something I like to run at big schools. But if you're at a small school and the only way that you're going to have a chance is having those upperclassmen, having that experience, Princeton might be a good option for you. But regardless, run something you guys know how to run. Don't change too quickly. If you want to change out of one offense into another, do it over the course of a couple of years. I promise you'll have a better experience than if you try to do it straight away. Now, if you take over a bad team that had a bad coach and nobody has any experience at anything, and you're a pretty good coach and can coach them up quickly, feel free to make a quick change and get into something that you like. So, number 6, back to recruiting. Guys, recruit locally first. In this game, there are only so many variables that you can change, especially as far as what interest to recruit. Let's see if we can get somebody that actually has some categories unlocked here. So you can see the recruits will be interested in academic, school prestige, coach discipline. You can see the categories. I don't have to read them to you. So year over year, you can change some of these. Like your school's prestige, you can increase it over time, right? And you can... your conference can increase in prestige, or you could change conferences. You can end up with better facilities. But as far as location goes, that's the only one that I like right now today on this July 11th. I can go in here and select recruits that are further away from my school or closer to my school and change how much of a benefit I'm getting from their interest in a location. So I will always recruit locally first. If I look at this list, I'm sitting here in Louisville, Kentucky. Here's Mike Bender in Kentucky, and you can see he's already been visited. That was definitely a priority. I went down and talked to him immediately, and I'm high up on his list. So we'll start to unlock these. Now you can see I've already visited him, but he's more interested in Tennessee and Clemson. So I don't have any of my time left this week, but I would bet money if I go in and talk to him, he's not got a ton of interest in location. But it's the only thing that it's the only one of these attributes that you have any control over right now. So start off local, start off in state, especially at a smaller school. Your only chance to get recruits at a smaller school is going to be on pitching location, pitching guys that are in state. As you start to grow a little bit, you can get outside into your region. Preferably, if you've got a pipeline state, then you would go to a pipeline state within your region. After that, within your region, but not a pipeline state. And then if you've got a national pipeline state, that's great. And then eventually you can expand your recruiting nationally or even internationally, depending on your budget, your school prestige, how you stack up, academics, facilities, all that good stuff comes into play. Speaking of that, people have all kinds of questions about the pipeline recruiting. And before this is over, I've all of a sudden forgot exactly where that is. Here we go, pipeline progression. Come into your coach's office. Open up your profile. Click pipeline progression. This is going to tell you every single state and how many recruits you've brought in from that state. And you can see the note right here at the top. You need to successfully recruit 10 players from a state to establish a recruiting pipeline. That's going to be easiest with obviously something that's in state. So I'll be able to get it in Kentucky probably easier than other states. But if there's a state, like if you're next to a talent-rich state like Florida, California, Texas, something like that, and you want to establish that pipeline, get cracking on it. The sooner you get it up and running, the easier it's going to be for you to bring players into there. Also, along those same lines, the pipeline goes with the head coach. So if I develop a pipeline into Kentucky and then I take a job in California, my coach will still have a pipeline into Kentucky. So the pipeline stays with the coach. All right, moving on down the list, or moving on up the list. I'm not sure what it should be. Tip number 5, you got to get a point guard. Guys, I've never seen a team fall apart faster than when I lose my very talented point guard. And you can see on this team, that's a problem I'm going to run into immediately. My 4.5-star point guard is a senior. He'll be gone next year. I've got a 2-star sophomore. I don't know if that's the answer in the future, so I've got a problem. But right now, I'm all right. Next year when he leaves, the fall-off will be dramatic. Point guard is so vital in basketball. Your point guard is controlling the ball, bringing it up, trying to beat the press, trying to get the offense started. He's got the ball in his hands a majority of the time. He's the one that's creating plays. You've got to get yourself a point guard. You know, they need to know how to run the plays. They need to have skill in whatever offenses you're choosing to run. So a lot of times you're going to want to have a point guard of the future ready and waiting. Obviously in my first year here, I haven't built this roster. This is what the computer generated, so I haven't set that up. But eventually, I really like to keep around 3 point guards, protect against people declaring for the draft early, leaving for transfer, just not panning out, not being a good player. I recruited him and thought they were going to be good, and it turned out he was a dud. All those things. I like to keep point guards around, and I like to try to keep them staggered so that I never have anybody younger than a junior running that position, unless it's one of the top 10 players in the country, in which case you've got to make an exception. But go and get yourself a point guard. There is nothing that's going to have a bigger impact on your team, comparatively speaking. And make sure, if you're trying to find somebody that's going to be running that point, make sure it's somebody that has the passing and handling abilities. Sometimes I will get into a position, like let's say next year I strike out on point guard recruiting, but I'll land 2 or 3 shooting guards. Okay, I might want to run one of those shooting guards at the point. Make sure it's somebody that knows how to pass and handle the ball, because the passing is certainly going to affect your assist rate. And assists mean the ball went in the basket, so that's the goal of the game, right? But whatever you do, however you do it, get yourself a point guard, make sure your team's set at that position. Tip number 4, you have got to hire an excellent recruiter. Hiring an assistant coach that has a very high skill at recruiting is one of the absolute biggest ways to get ahead in this game. We can come over here and take a look at my staff. Again, I didn't get this set up, but you can see what the recruiting ability is for each of these guys. Like if we click on Luke Murray as our recruiter, and he's a 74. That's not bad. At a school like Louisville, I would like to have that up closer to 90. This would be good for more of a mid-major program or a low-major program, but I like to bring in recruiters 85 or higher. And I make those guys my first assistant coach. That way I'm shelling out all of the money to them, because that's what I value the most. I don't want, if my recruiter is a third assistant coach making $20,000 a year, like I'm losing him year one, right? He's going to go be a second assistant somewhere. I don't want that to happen. I don't want him to get an offer for $40,000 and leave me for some nonsense. Especially with a school like Louisville and that kind of budget, this $155,000 on Dino Gaudio, yeah, $150, $170, $190. I will pay for a recruiter at a big school. I'll pay for a recruiter anywhere, but those are the kind of dollar ranges I'm looking at a school with a $450,000 budget. If you got a more limited budget, $150 $200,000 a year. Maybe you're only paying 60 of that to a top recruiter, but that's the position that you want to put your most focus on. It's the most important assistant coach, because understand what these recruiting abilities do. Your assistant coach's recruiting ability handles your weekly call list. It also handles your campus visits. So that's when, as you're trying to generate interest in recruits, your first assistant coach is handling all of that. Your head coach is really not coming into the picture until it's time for the in-home visits on September 11th. All the rest of that interest generation is done by the assistant. So it's absolutely vital. Go get yourself a first assistant coach who's got the highest recruiting ability you can get right now, and I promise you, your next class will look better than the class that you just brought in. Tip number 3, guys, you've got to have a consistent strategy. And what I mean by this is there's a handful of different areas in this game that you're inputting to give the simulation engine, right? I mean, you've got your philosophies. You've also got your strategies over here. You've got your depth over here. And you need to make all of these line up and come together. If you want to go out and you want to be Michigan State, right? You want to run maybe a little bit of a slower offense, but you want to hit the boards. You're all about defense, having those big guys, getting it inside, pound the paint, that sort of thing. But you don't want to crank up the pace. You don't want to go heavy on a zone defense. You don't want to set a strategy that plays a 1-2-2 zone defense 90% of the time. You want to crash the boards. You want defensive intensity, defensive crash boards. You're not pressing full court. You're in a man-to-man, right? So you need all of these things to match up. If I say, for example, I want to run something like the mid-90s Kentucky Wildcats, Rick Pitino, right? Full court, high intensity, playing a ton of guys, full court defense, all that. Whatever your full court defense, you can run a full court man, you can run a full court zone. That wouldn't really be relevant. But you're going to want a deep bench for that, right? Because you're going to put your defensive intensity way up. When you increase the defensive intensity, you're going to pick up more fouls, so you're going to need to have a deeper bench. So an example of a terrible idea would be to put this defensive intensity all the way up, put this full court defense all the way up, and then come over here into your depth and try to run your players 34 minutes a game like I've got set up here. You got to be consistent. If you're going with a deep bench, it better show up over here. These minutes need to come down. 24, 26 minutes maybe for the starters, and have a deep bench that can go out there and play some minutes and contribute. Because your starters are going to pick up fouls and they're going to get tired. You're playing high intensity. If you coach the end games as opposed to a simulation, you'll notice a higher defensive intensity will lead to your players get tired faster. So you're going to have to sub them out more. So that's just one example. But I mean, you need to be consistent in each thing that you do. If you want to have an offense that goes quick and shoots a ton of threes, well, you better recruit three-point shooters. You're probably going to want to run, if you come over to the strategy page, if you want to be, running gun shooting threes, I would suggest that you're running the 5-out. 5-outs designed for teams with good perimeter players, ball behind the arc, allowing for outside shots. If you're trying to play running gun with the Princeton, you're doing something wrong. So figure out what your strategy is and then apply it everywhere. Apply it in your coaching philosophies. Apply it in your strategy page, your practice plan, your offensive set usage, and most importantly, recruit players that are built to those offenses. Like if we look at, you just look at the flex. When run correctly, easy shots are freed up in the low and high post for all players, but the big men must be able to handle the ball and pass the ball effectively. If you're running the flex, but you're not recruiting big men that can handle and pass, you're not running the flex as well as it could be run, right? I mean, that's sort of the entire point. If you're running the high post, your big players are going to be out of position for offensive rebounds. So if you got a big man you just went out and recruited an offensive rebounder for putbacks, you better not be running them in a high post. Whatever your plan is, make sure it's consistent and applied across the board in everything that you do, and you'll see exactly how the game responds to that and how you're going to start racking up the wins. Number 2, guys, and it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that this is only number 2. Okay, pay attention to your players' scoring rating. If you come in here to the roster, you can see right here, this is the scoring rating. Our league is using a 0 to 100 adjusted scale. This is new in this year's version of the game, but you can get a feel for what the ratings are looking at this screen, and it'll apply whatever rating system you're using. The same theory applies, right? You need to pay attention to scoring. That's a huge thing. So a lot of people are going to come in here and look at this and say, okay, well, Antoine Gordon has got a 95 on his jumper, so he should be really good at outside shots, right? Well, sure, he's going to be really good at outside shots, but he's not going to be as likely to shoot. He can't create his own shot as well. So the scoring is a little bit about being able to create your own shot, being able to get your shot off. Some people can get a shot off with a hand in their face and hit it. So a guy like Matt Julius is going to be a better scorer from the outside, even though Gordon has a higher shooting rating. The better example is probably Pryor. Pryor would also score way more points a game than Gordon, even though Gordon's got a great rating at jumper. I mean, if he gets an open shot, he's going to hit it. So his percentage will probably be high, but his points per game are going to suffer. This guy is not a scorer. He's very much a role player. Now, this is the guy, maybe you bring him in at the end of the game because he knows how to shoot a half-court shot or something, but this is not your superstar. Just because of this field goal jumper rating, you cannot pay attention to that. Now, if you can get them both, like a guy like Julius, that's a good spot to be in. You'll also find that it's really, really effective to get high-scoring big men that can shoot these inside shots. If you're running an offense that requires your guards to be in the post, you might want to check out that field goal inside rating. But do not overlook the scoring. You need to know that. I mean, as far as a rating that correlates with a lot of stars over here and a lot of potential stars, you're not going to find anything more important than scoring. If your guy's got a high scoring rating, he's almost certainly a starter. I haven't used this 1 to 100 as often. Once you get guys up 7, 8 scoring, you're talking about some really good players. If you got a guy that's a 9 in scoring, he's an absolute superstar. The last guy that I had a 9 in scoring on the 1 to 10 scale, he was the most outstanding player in the Final Four, and we won a national championship. So a 9 is ridiculous. He was well over 20 points a game. Don't ignore the scoring rating. It's massively important. And that's only tip number 2. So it's going to lead us all the way back to number 1. For the second year in a row, the most important thing to know about Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2021, in my opinion, the opinion of anyone that I've talked to, GM Games, everybody involved, all say the same thing. Guys, the most important thing in this game, when you're recruiting, pay attention to the camps. There's nothing more important than paying attention to those camps when you're recruiting. You are going to see a lot of these guys who are very highly rated, and they don't do that well in camps. And I know people get confused about these star ratings, and they think, oh, okay, well, I'm recruiting Donald Jarrett here. Okay, he's a 5-star recruit, so I'm going to recruit him, and he's going to get to my school, and he's going to be a 5-star player, right? No, absolutely not. These ratings are just based on the reports that I pulled. I pulled the national report or a regional report, and they're based off of that. These are based off of scouting evaluations, but it's not necessarily reflective of their current ability. It may be reflective of potential. I've seen a lot of very highly rated guys, 5-star recruits that come in, only show up on campus as a 2-star player, and then leave the first year, and they get drafted. Because a lot of times you'll see huge disparities in their current ability rating versus potential ability rating. And we all know the NBA drafts on potential, right? So some of these guys, they might have all the potential in the world, but if they're not showing up in these camps, they're probably not very good players. So what's a good camp? Well, the Indy Elite camp is going to be the top. I forget the numbers. Some of the camps are 150, 200, 250 players. the Indy Elite Camp is the best camp in the nation. And Khalid Jones was one of the top 10 players at that camp. So you know right off the bat, this right here, we're talking about one of the top 10 players in the nation. Now, of course, he's ranked number 1 overall. He's a 5-star guy, 25 points a game, 14 rebounds. We already knew he was good. But this is going to solidify it. Now, let's come through here as we display one of the new features of this game. You can just scroll through your entire list here through these arrows and see. So here's Nick Tui, top 5 player at Indy. So he's going to be very solid. Another top 5 at Indy. Top 25. Decent, not spectacular. I believe that this note is probably telling me, it'll go top 5, top 10, top 25, and then decent. I think that decent is a player in that 25 to 50 range. So this isn't a spectacular note, but still, this is a top 50 player in the country. I mean, he'll be all right. He's not on the level of those other guys. Let's keep going here. Didn't stand out at Indy Elite. That's terrible. Jason Humphrey, 5 stars. I will bet you anything, Jason Humphrey, when he shows up at someone's school, he's going to be a 2.5, 2-star player, maybe 3 stars. He'll probably have really great potential. He could still very well be a one and done. But you would very much prefer some of the Nick Tui, Bernie Newton, one of these guys that was a top 5 at Indy, as opposed to was it Humphrey? Yeah, Humphrey. So you've got to pay attention to those camps, because that's how you're going to bring in good players. And you really need to get a feel. I can't give you a hard and fast rule. They always say recruiting's more of an art than a science. So I can't give you a rule on what you should be looking for, but you need to know what type of players are going to make a difference at your program. If you're a blue blood program, if you are trying to win a national championship and you've got a legit shot at it year in and year out, you need to be focusing on guys that are doing well at the Indy camp, probably top 25 players, at least top 50. We aren't to the regional. We actually have run one regional. Let's see here. You will run regional camps in this game. And I believe I've got a player somewhere in here, Brian Wheeler. He was top 25 at Indy, and then he was the MVP at the Las Vegas Review. So this is a top 25 player in the country, and it's looking like he's the best player in the West region. So just a lot of times the camp information is going to be consistent in my experience. If they do well at one camp, they're probably doing well at other camps, and it's probably going to track pretty well. But if you get guys, depending on the level of your school, if you can't go after those top 25 guys, maybe you can go after the top 25 guys in your region, right? Or maybe you can go after the guys who were decent but not spectacular in your region. And if you're a 30 prestige school, one of the top 50 players in the nation is an absolute steal. But one of the top 50 players in your region is still probably going to be one of your best players. So, keep in mind, what kind of school are you at? The top schools can obviously recruit pretty much anybody that they want. If you're at one of those middling type of schools, like just something, middle of the road, you're at Iowa, right? If you land, maybe you're not looking at the top 10 players at Indy, but if you're landing a guy that's a top 25 player in the Great Plains region, you're probably improving your school. So know what your prestige level is, know the level of recruits that you can probably get. 30 prestige schools aren't pulling 5-star players by and large. I'm sure there's a one-off here and there. But know who you can realistically get, and then look through that camp information and see who's performing well in camps so that you can bring in players who are ready to help you win games on the hardwood. Guys, that's all I've got. I'm sure that there's more information and other things that can be done to improve your game, but those are my absolute top 10. If you all have any other questions, make sure that you're in the GM Games Discord, that you're on their forums. Hopefully you're seeing this on YouTube. You can ask questions in the comments. I'll try to reach out as I become aware of them. But Discord's always the easiest way to get in touch with somebody and clarify. Man, I really hope that this video has helped you guys improve your game on Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2021. I hope it lands you the job of your dreams. I hope it gets you in the Final Four, and I hope you're hanging banners up there real soon. Guys, I've had an absolute blast with this game, so I hope this helps you all have as much fun as I've had with it. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, this is Cards for GM Games, and I'll see you later.